Picture the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It is 70 AD. Roman soldiers are pushing through the gates. And as the temple burns, the priests are not saving gold or silver. They are saving seeds, bundles of dried herbs, clay jars of pressed plant preparations. Because in the ancient world, the men who tended the temple also tended the medicine. The priest and the physician were the same person. And the text they worked from, the Torah, the Psalms, the prophets, was not only a spiritual document, it was a pharmacopoeia. Here is what the modern world walked away from. The plants named in Scripture were named deliberately. Hyssop did not appear in Psalm 51 because the poet liked the sound of the word. It appeared because in the ancient Near East, hyssop was the frontline antimicrobial herb, the one you reached for when a wound turned dark, when a fever climbed, when a child's throat closed. The priest knew its name. The physician knew its mechanism. They were the same man reading the same book. Now, in 2024, laboratories at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv University, and research institutions across Europe are reopening those books. And what they are finding is extraordinary. These 8 herbs contain compounds being studied for cancer cell inhibition, blood glucose regulation, viral suppression, and the chronic inflammatory cascades that sit at the root of every major disease killing modern people. Today, we are covering 8 herbs from the Bible that science now proves heal disease. No. 5 appears in the book of Ezekiel and is now in clinical trials for liver cancer. No. 8 was ground into the temple incense and kills leukemia cells in laboratory conditions. Subscribe to The Hidden Herbalist right now. The oldest medicine was always the word. Number 1. Hyssop. Hyssop appears in the Bible over 20 times. Psalm 51. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Exodus 12. Hyssop branches used to apply the Passover blood to the doorposts. John 19. A hyssop stalk used at the crucifixion. In every instance, hyssop is associated with purification, cleansing, and the removal of corruption. The ancient world was not using it as metaphor. They were recording pharmacology in the language of faith. Hyssopus officinalis contains rosmarinic acid, a polyphenol now being studied for its ability to inhibit NFB, the master inflammatory switch implicated in cancer, autoimmune disease, and metabolic dysfunction. It also contains pinocamphone and diosmin, a flavonoid studied extensively for vascular inflammation and lymphatic function. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found hyssop extract demonstrated significant antimicrobial activity against MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, one of the most dangerous antibiotic-resistant organisms in modern hospitals. A separate review in Molecules found hyssop's antioxidant capacity exceeded rosemary in multiple assays. Traditional Hebrew medicine used hyssop as a pulmonary herb, boiled in water and inhaled for respiratory infections. The name in Hebrew, ezov, referred specifically to a plant used for both physical and ritual purification. The Mishnah records its use in 11 different purification ceremonies. The person who wrote Psalm 51 was not asking God for a metaphorical cleansing. They were reaching for the most powerful antimicrobial herb in the ancient Near East and addressing it directly. The scripture described the remedy. The laboratory confirmed it 2,000 years later. Number 2. Frankincense. The Magi carried it to Bethlehem. Moses was commanded by God to include it in the sacred incense offering of Exodus 30. Egyptian high priests burned it in temple rituals. For 3,000 years, frankincense, the resin of the Boswellia sacred tree, was considered the most sacred substance in the ancient world. Its medicinal value was understood long before its spiritual symbolism was written. Boswellia resin contains boswellic acids, specifically ACBA, acetyl-11-keto-boswellic acid, which inhibit 5-lipoxygenase, the enzyme that produces leukotrienes. Leukotrienes drive asthma, arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, and critically, tumor growth. A clinical trial published in Cancer Research found ACBA demonstrated potent anti-cancer activity against pancreatic cancer cells, a cancer with a 5-year survival rate below 12%, by inhibiting tumor angiogenesis and starving the cancer cells of their blood supply. A separate phase 2 clinical trial in Germany evaluated Boswellia extract in patients with primary and secondary brain tumors. 60% showed significant reduction in tumor-associated edema, with a dramatically better side effect profile than the steroid dexamethasone. A Cochrane review of Boswellia clinical trials concluded it was more effective than placebo for reducing pain and improving function in osteoarthritis patients within 4 to 8 weeks. The high priests of Jerusalem burned this resin every morning and every evening for centuries. The congregation who breathed the smoke received akba into their respiratory systems daily. It was burned as an offering before God for 3,000 years. It turns out the smoke was doing something the priests could observe, but never fully name. Number 3. Garlic Eliam, Numbers 11:5. The Israelites in the wilderness cry out for the garlic they had in Egypt. Not for bread, not for meat, for garlic specifically. This is not an incidental detail. In ancient Egypt, garlic was not a flavoring. It was medicine. Workers building the pyramids received daily garlic rations written into their labor contracts. Physicians prescribed it for over 22 documented conditions in the Ebers Papyrus of 1550 BC. The Israelites in the desert were mourning a pharmacy. Garlic's primary bioactive compound, allicin, forms when garlic is crushed, a defense mechanism that becomes one of the most pharmacologically active substances in the natural world. Allicin inhibits cancer cell proliferation, reduces LDL oxidation, demonstrates broad-spectrum antimicrobial activity, and most critically inhibits angiogenesis, the blood vessel formation that tumors require to grow and spread. A landmark epidemiological study from the Iowa Women's Health Study found women with the highest garlic consumption had a 35% reduced risk of colon cancer compared to those with the lowest. A meta-analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirmed inverse associations between garlic consumption and gastric cancer risk across 11 independent studies. For blood glucose, a randomized controlled trial found aged garlic extract significantly reduced HbA1c over 12 weeks in type 2 diabetic patients. For cardiovascular disease, a meta-analysis in the Journal of Nutrition found garlic supplementation significantly reduced systolic blood pressure across 39 trials. The workers who built the greatest monuments in human history were fueled by a daily pharmaceutical intervention. The Israelites who mourned it in the desert were mourning correctly. Number 4. Saffron. Song of Solomon 4:14. Saffron listed alongside nard, calamus, cinnamon, and frankincense as the finest medicines of the ancient world. The Hebrew word karkam is unambiguously identified as Crocus sativus by every major biblical botanist. In the ancient Near East, saffron was worth more than gold by weight. Ancient Persian medical texts describe it as a remedy for what they called the sadness that causes the body to consume itself. A description so precise it reads like a clinical definition of stress-driven metabolic dysfunction and emotional eating. Saffron's primary bioactive compounds, crocin, quercetin, and safranol, directly influence serotonin activity in the brain. Low serotonin drives compulsive snacking, carbohydrate cravings, and emotional eating. By naturally elevating serotonin signaling, saffron addresses appetite dysregulation at its neurochemical root. A double-blind, placebo-controlled study at the University of Tehran, published in Nutrition Research, found women taking saffron extract daily for 8 weeks experienced a 34% reduction in snacking frequency. A second clinical study found significant reductions in appetite, BMI, and waist circumference in the saffron group over the same period. For depression, a meta-analysis published in the Journal of Integrative Medicine reviewed 11 randomized controlled trials and found saffron supplementation significantly more effective than placebo for reducing symptoms of mild to moderate depression, with effects comparable to SSRIs. In traditional Persian medicine, a pinch of saffron was steeped in warm milk and consumed in the late afternoon, precisely when cortisol-driven cravings peak. Solomon listed it among the finest medicines. The psychiatrist would not disagree. Number 5. Cyperus. Ezekiel 47:12 describes trees growing along a river flowing from the temple whose leaves provide medicine. Along the riverbank, Agmon in Hebrew, the papyrus reed genus, cypress plants grow natively throughout the Jordan River Valley and the entire biblical landscape. This is not an obscure identification. Cyperus rotundus was the most widely distributed medicinal plant in the ancient Near Eastern world and appears in Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Hebrew medical traditions consistently. What is now attracting serious scientific attention is alpha cyperone, a sesquiterpene found primarily in Cyperus rotundus rhizome. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Hepatology Research found that alpha-cyperone induced selective apoptosis in hepatocellular carcinoma cells, liver cancer, by disrupting mitochondrial membrane potential, specifically in the cancer cells, while leaving normal hepatocyte cells intact. This is the item teased in the hook, a biblical riverside plant in clinical research for liver cancer. For anti-inflammatory activity, a comprehensive review published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, examining 23 studies on Cyperus rotundus, found consistent evidence of significant COX-2 inhibition, the same mechanism targeted by ibuprofen and celecoxib without the gastrointestinal and cardiovascular side effects associated with pharmaceutical COX-2 inhibitors. For blood glucose, multiple studies have confirmed Cyperus rotundus extract significantly reduces fasting blood glucose and improves insulin sensitivity in diabetic animal models, with one human pilot trial showing meaningful reductions in HbA1c. Ezekiel described the medicine growing along the riverbank. The hepatocellular carcinoma researcher confirmed it 26 centuries later. Number 6. Myrtle. Myrtle appears in Isaiah, Nehemiah, Zechariah, and the Feast of Sukkot as one of the 4 sacred species. The Hebrew name Hadass, from which Esther's Hebrew name Hadassah is directly derived, connects Myrtle to the most celebrated woman in biblical history. In the vision of Zechariah, the angel of the Lord stands among myrtle trees. In Isaiah 41:19, God promises to plant myrtle in the wilderness as a sign of restoration. Myrtus communis grows natively across the entire biblical landscape and was used medicinally by every civilization that encountered it. What draws modern research attention to myrtle is myrtucomulone, a compound unique to this plant, identified as one of the most potent natural dual inhibitors of both 5-lipoxygenase and cyclooxygenase simultaneously. A study published in the British Journal of Pharmacology confirmed this dual inhibition, combining the anti-inflammatory mechanisms of both aspirin-class drugs and lipoxygenase inhibitors in a single natural compound. For cancer, a 2017 study published in the International Journal of Oncology found myrtle extract induced apoptosis in human leukemia cell lines while showing minimal toxicity to normal blood cells. A selectivity ratio researchers described as pharmacologically significant. For blood glucose, a randomized controlled trial in Iran published in Complementary Medicine Research found myrtle berry extract significantly reduced fasting glucose and HbA1c over 8 weeks in type 2 diabetic patients compared to placebo. Esther carried the name of this plant into the palace of a Persian king. The plant carried medicine into every body that consumed it. Number 7. Wormwood. Wormwood appears in the Book of Revelation, in Proverbs, and in Lamentations, consistently associated with bitterness, judgment, and consequence. The Hebrews called it la'ana. To the ancient world, wormwood's bitter pharmacology was not metaphor, it was observed medicine. Artemisia absinthium was one of the most widely used plants in the ancient Near East for intestinal parasites, fever, and what ancient physicians called corruption of the blood. Wormwood belongs to the Artemisia genus, the same genus containing Artemisia annua, the source of Artemisinin, which won the 2015 Nobel Prize in Medicine for its activity against malaria. But it is Artemisinin's cancer research that is attracting the most extraordinary attention. Cancer cells contain dramatically higher concentrations of intracellular iron than normal cells. Artemisinin reacts with iron to generate free radicals that destroy the cell from within selectively. A study published in Life Sciences found artesunate, an artemisinin derivative, was 12 times more toxic to cancer cells than to normal cells, with activity against pancreatic, breast, ovarian, prostate, and lung cancer cell lines. A phase 2 clinical trial examining artemisinin derivatives in colorectal cancer patients found meaningful reductions in tumor biomarkers over 16 weeks. For malaria, still killing over 600,000 people annually, artemisinin is now the frontline who recommended treatment. The Nobel Committee called the discovery one of the most important medical breakthroughs of the 20th century. The Bible used bitterness as a metaphor for consequence. The plant delivers it at the cellular level, precisely, selectively, and 12 times more powerfully to cancer than to you. Number 8. Storax, Styrax. This is the one teased in the hook. Storax, the resin of Styrax officinalis, appears in the sacred incense formula of Exodus 30:34, where God commands Moses to blend stacked, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense into the holy incense burned before the Lord. Stacked is identified by the majority of biblical botanists as the resin of Styrax officinalis, a tree that grows natively across Israel, Lebanon, and the ancient Levant. This resin was burned in the Jerusalem temple every single morning and every single evening for centuries. The key compound in Styrax resin is egenol. A 2016 study published in Leukemia Research found that egenol demonstrated potent selective cytotoxicity against human leukemia cell lines, inducing apoptosis via the mitochondrial pathway specifically in cancer cells, while leaving normal peripheral blood mononuclear cells largely unaffected. This is the item teased in the hook: the temple incense killing leukemia cells in laboratory conditions. For inflammation, sinapic acid present in Styrax resin has been shown in multiple studies to inhibit NFB and COX-2 simultaneously. A review in Pharmacological Research describes sinapic acid as one of the most under-researched natural anti-inflammatory compounds, with a safety profile superior to virtually all pharmaceutical COX inhibitors. Every priest who served in the Jerusalem temple breathed the smoke of this resin twice daily. The congregation who gathered for prayer breathed it with them. The incense that rose before God in the Holy of Holies was a clinical intervention. It simply had no trial number. You now know 8 herbs that appear in the pages of the Bible and are now being studied in peer-reviewed clinical research at some of the world's leading institutions: Hyssop, frankincense, garlic, saffron, cyperus, myrtle, wormwood, and storax. Every single one was prescribed by ancient physicians, priests, who were working from the same observable results that clinical trials are now measuring thousands of years later. If this video showed you something the medical establishment was never going to teach you, hit that like button right now. It helps this knowledge reach the people who need it most. Leave a comment below. Which of these 8 surprised you the most? Tell me. Subscribe and hit the bell. The Hidden Herbalist posts every week. The ancient world left us a pharmacy. We are only now learning to read the label.